Hello, everybody!
Everybody!
Woo!
Turn this up in our headphones, Charles.
In our headphones!
Turning
All
it
of them.
up. Hello, everybody, one and all. Welcome to yet another very exciting episode of the Friends Talking Fantasy Podcast. My name is Charles, and with me today, as always, is my lifelong friend and co-host, Dylan.
I'm ready to talk some fantasy with my friends, Charles.
And with us today, but not always, very exciting, our featured guest today, independent author of The Daughter of Flood and Fury, Levi Jacobs.
Hello, everybody, to quote those who have come before.
Woo! Hello, welcome. And you know what? We are super happy to have you on here, Levi.
I'm pumped to be on. It was so great of you guys to read the book and to do that spoiler-free episode. I'm excited to get into the juicy spoiler section that's coming later. It's excellent stuff. So it's great to be here.
But all those who are tuning in just to get to know Levi, don't worry. We do have the first half that will keep spoiler free for all of you. So don't turn this down in your headphones just yet, because
I was going to say it's spoiler-free for the book, but it's spoilerific for my life. If you want to get to know me, we're going to talk about some dirt.
Very
full
well
on spoilers for the life of Levi Jacobs. Well, I've got some spoilers for you here because we know that you're a Spiffbo finalist. We know that you're a Zebulon Award winner. We know that you're author of Daughter of Flood and Fury, which we read and loved on this show. We know that you're the author of The Empire of Resonance and the Resonance Saga novellas. But one thing I don't know is, am I talking to Levi Jacobs or am I talking to L.W. Jacobs right now?
Yeah. So I'm in the process of defining my public personas. Now that I have two of them, I think, let's say you're talking to Levi. He's the one that I've known for most of my life, and L.W. appeared when I got a publishing contract. So
Nice.
I'm coming to you as the author of Daughter of Flood and Fury. L.W. has no idea what the book is about. He has had no fingers in that pie. So
okay,
LW is missing out. I'll say that.
Yes. All right. Well, I've heard Levi is a little bit more grimdark than an LW as well. So we'll have to watch out for what Levi is capable of over here.
It's true. I would say that LW and the Empire forthcoming Empire of Resonance saga is more on the noble right, nobody can get killed, nothing can really go wrong side of fantasy, and Levi is open to a few more hard knocks. Although I don't know if I'm grimdark. I might just be slightly grumpy dark. I'm not sure. Still defining the genre.
Wow, yeah, Lord Grumpy Dark might still be available as a Twitter handle, so you got to get on that before this airs.
Copyright.
Or I might take it. But all right, well, you're just talking about how you have a traditional publishing deal that happened, right? Like, so you're officially going to be a hybrid author now?
I'm officially a hybrid, yeah. After I think being officially, it's just barely, let's see, I'm thinking how long I was in indie before that. Before I was just a nothing. I spent a long time as a nothing, where I should say writing in my closet or in various strange spaces. I think since 2013 is when I started taking it seriously, and I put a practice book out in 2018, and I would say that I became a real indie author in terms of I had a thing that you could buy that I was proud of in 2019. So I spent 2 years doing that, and now I don't know if I can ever go back from being a hybrid unless like I abandoned my indie career and like unpublished all those books. I think I might be hybrid for life, but
or burn all your bridges with all traditional publishing folks and all that. I guess would be the other option.
It sounds fun. I walked away from from a doctorate program in order to become a writer, and I'll admit there was some deep part of my ego. This is the spoiler section about Levi's life that we're referring to. Yeah. There was some deep part of my ego that really enjoyed just saying no. Like, you really need to come, you need to study this, you're very talented. I'm like, I'm gonna go write fantasy books, thank you very much. So I may do that to the trad industry at some point.
my advisor in my doctoral program probably would not like me to be talking to you right now. He'd be worried that I would
Oh
be.
man, are you deep in a doctoral program?
I'm deep in it. Yeah, counseling
Are
psych
you
over at CSU actually, which is, I know
awesome?
your rival. Actually, you're
I suppose. Yeah, I don't really
Steve
like
Boulder.
subscribe to the totem pole in the same way. Um,
Mm.
are you ABD? Are you?
No, I've got a lot left, but
Yeah,
enough
man.
about me,
Enough
Levi.
about you.
Enough about Dylan, please. Don't get him started.
Dylan spoilers. Just don't ask him about his research. That's what I've learned about doctoral students. Do not ask.
Yeah, no one wants to hear about that. What we want to hear about is you, Levi, and one of the questions that we wanted to ask you was what drew you toward writing speculative fiction and fantasy.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I feel like I don't like there's probably a lot of answers, but probably just reading a ton of them. I was lucky enough to be in this advanced reading class in 3rd grade, and we read The Hobbit,
Mm.
and I was blown away by it. And then I read The Lord of the Rings after we were done with it, and wept copiously at the death of Gandalf, having no idea that in fantasy people, well, we're not in the spoilers section yet, so I'm not going to say what happens to Gandalf for those of you who haven't read the book. But I just kept like consuming mass amounts of fantasy, like David Eddings and Terry Brooks and Margaret Weis, Tracy Hickman, and then finding Robert Jordan and going deep down that rabbit hole until like the strange social pressures, etc., and my own angst in high school like drew me away from such intellectual pursuits. But it planted a seed deep. I feel like I was always a storyteller, and those were the stories that clung to me. And I kept avoiding this call throughout most of my life as I did other things. I spent a long time writing creative nonfiction because I was living in other countries and traveling and writing about my experiences. And then, like I said, I started this master's degree at Dylan's rival university. And like within a month of starting it, I was like, this is really hard. And I 60% want to do this degree, and I 100% suddenly want to write fantasy novels. And I had this awful moment of like, I've set up my life to do this. Do I walk away or do I stick with it? And I ended up sticking with it. But as soon as I could get that master's degree, I walked away from the doctorate, like I said, and just started writing books. And it's the only thing in my life that I have stuck with this long and not second guessed. So I must have done the right thing.
It's always tough when you're like so far down one path to decide you're just gonna stop doing this and pivot now at this stage. Like you're so far in your education and it's like you have this whole career plan. It's like I'm gonna start my career over from the beginning by going down this other avenue.
Totally. It's like Macbeth talking about having waited so far in blood, like, like just keep going. Right. It's a sunk cost fallacy, but it's very compelling.
Right. So kudos to you. My whole question that I'd like to ask Laura on this line of like, why speculative fiction? It's like, how did you get yourself mentally to the place where you're like, I'm going to sit down and write my first book, like cover to cover? Like, what was that? Like, how far along were you in the process from leaving school to actually starting the first book that you were going to finish? What's that?
Totally. Yeah. I started off hearing this very old advice that what you needed to do was write short stories and get those published in known magazines. And then traditional publishers would notice you and you would eventually get a book deal from that. And so I started writing short stories, and I always wanted to put more story in there and wanted to be larger in scope than was really feasible. And they suffered from it. I was reading this advice newsletter that was going out by David Farland, who is the editor for the Writers of the Future competition and teaches writing. And I just wrote back to him. I was like, hey, I'm just discovering that what I really want to do is write books, even though I haven't made that much progress in selling my short stories. Is that crazy? And he's like, no, books are where the money is. Like, follow your heart, just do it. And I was like, thank you so much.
That's awesome. Isn't it also, Dylan, help me remember here, was it Joe Abercrombie that was just like, I probably should have written short stories, but I decided to start with Everest, by writing the first Law trilogy, right?
Well, I'm not sure, honestly, about whether or not Abercrombie said that, but it's not surprising. Levi, you cut your teeth on Robert Jordan and Tolkien over there that you're like, no, I want something big and epic, and short stories aren't doing it for me right here. And you definitely went that route with Daughter of Flood and Fury, or at least what I see you building with Daughter of Flood and Fury, and we'll get into more of that for sure in the spoiler portion. But we were wondering what inspired you to write Daughter of Flood and Fury in particular. Like, how'd you get there?
Yeah, this is a really interesting one because I'm quite the planner, and usually I'm just very methodical about how I start a book, and I tend to execute something like that plan once I've like gotten it all out. And I started writing a book called All the King's Bastards, and it had a completely different pitch. It had a kind of similar setting, and it had a main character, and I was developing the side characters for it, and one of them was this one-eyed girl, interestingly, who had been kidnapped from a temple, who had this ability to read minds through water. And I started writing her backstory, and I started writing sketches of her in different scenes from this book I was going to write. And she was just so much more interesting than the main character, and so compelling. And there was something, I don't know, there's something about Alethea's character that that gripped me in a way that none of my other main characters have. And I feel bad saying that because I feel like I have a deep personal relationship with all my main characters, but Alethea hits deeper than all of them somehow, and I felt that early on. And I just kind of recognized, like, this is the book that I want to write. And so I kept going on her backstory, and then like it became front story. And I threw out a lot of the things. There's just a little bit of the setting that's left from that one, and a few of the things. It's funny how she was one-eyed, and then that one eye characteristic got transferred to another character that's in the book. And some things changed and things got switched around, but that was mainly it. And then I feel like my other inspiration is always in the beginning of reading other fantasy novels or watching like speculative shows or whatever, when I'm just starting to get a hint of what the setup is and the magic and the characters, I get really excited because I'm like, oh man, they're going to do this. That's going to be so cool. And then they don't do it. And they have this moment of, oh, that's my idea now. Wow.
They don't do it, so you can.
Yeah. I was like, they went some other direction, and I think my direction's cooler. And the concept for gender-based magic was that. I don't remember what it was, but there was something where like men and women had different abilities. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. And it's going to be like this huge division between them, and like they're going to be connected but separate, and it's going to be kind of an illusion because of like gender is a thing that society decides what it is rather than like it's not sex. And I went down this rabbit hole, and then the book ended up being entirely different than that. And I had that moment of like, oh, that's mine now. And then I love Brandon Sanderson, and I go very, very deep into the backgrounds of my magic. And so I went from there into this deep thing that is not even on the page yet. But like we said, the book is the first of 9. So we've got a lot of room to expand.
Yes, but a trilogy of trilogies, if I'm quoting you correctly.
A trilogy of trilogies, yes. That is my ambition.
So I'm excited to see where, because you can see in the background this more epic world developing. Charles and I were chatting about that on our episode where we discussed it. There's a lot that you're kind of slipping in there that we see is going to be fleshed out probably in the future. So we're pumped for all of that. And
awesome.
You know, it's interesting. You kind of your story about finding this other character that was really calling to you, basically it's kind of a similar thing like what you're describing with the graduate school stuff, right? Like if you're 60% in what was it, all the King's Bastards,
all the King's Bastards
all the King's Bastards, you're 60% in on that story, but then you're finding yourself 100% in on Alethea and Daughter of Flood and Fury. Then I think you made a good call following that, just like you made a good call following the desire to write fantasy.
Yeah, and I think that's not like following my gut or my heart has not always been easy for me, but as a writer, the first book that I wrote seriously, so the first book that I ever wrote was Conan fan fiction,
Nice.
And that was
Nice.
because I knew that I was going to be a total geek about world building, and I was like, I can't balance my like precious crazy ideas about what the world is along with plot and character. I know that's going to be too much in my first book, so I was like, let me just take the world of Hyperborea, let me take a character that I know so well because I loved Conan when I was younger, and just do plot and just do side characters. But the book after that was a more ambitious thing. That's the one that I put out as a test in 2018. It's called Ache, and it's published under a pen name, Kelvin Myers. So there's actually a third persona floating around back here, very Shalon-like. And when I started it, I had this instinct that I needed to write it in first person, even though there were 3 points of view. And like the rational part of me was like, no, you can't do multiple points of view that are all first. That's very strange, and people will be turned off by your point of view. And so I didn't do it. And when I was done with the book, on reflection, I was like, that was still the right thing to do. And there's no way in hell that I'm can I cuss? Do we have a clean rating?
I think you can say hell, but I think that we generally, Charles, we could label a single episode explicit if need be, but generally,
make yourself comfortable, Levi.
Don't censor yourself.
I can just use in-world cusses. I mean, like,
you could just say like, that flooding story.
You know?
Yeah, that slopping novel where I didn't put in the
exactly.
I regretted that choice, and I felt like the book was weaker for it. And so I sort of learned that, like, at least in this stuff, I need to follow my gut. Like, I immersed myself so deeply in fantasy back in the day, and now I read a ton that like, you have this deep storyteller mind that you just have to trust when it says something like that. I know that the Daughter of Flood and Fury is written in first person present tense, and that is an unusual choice. And it's what felt right. And so, like, I just kind of like cross my fingers that it doesn't turn people off. But I think that the book would have been worse if I'd done anything else. It would not be as strong. So you just got to do it.
Yeah, the first person present perspective stuck to me right away, because you start, and I don't think it's a spoiler to say, the first scene is like a fight sequence. And so when you have it in first person present, it's like, oh, I hit him in the knee, or something like that. It's like, it's very direct. And then, the book moves very quickly too. So it's like the action moves quickly. The action is very like direct and very personal. So I haven't read a first person present in a long time. So it almost hit me like it's kind of like a breath of fresh air every once in a while. And I think it's like, you write what fits the character, you write what fits the scene, you write what fits, your style.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad it worked. I wanted that sense of immediacy. Like I wanted this book to just like grab you and not let go until it was done. And I also felt like that was the right tense for it. Just like first person is the tense that's going to get you like deep in the character the fastest and help you like connect with them the best.
Certainly.
Yeah. And sometimes as a reader, I feel like I read a lot of author interviews or hear them on podcasts and stuff, and people are always saying, oh yeah, I was worried that like would readers not be able to like take something like this, like first person present tense, or even like N.K. Jemisin does second person and things like that. And I don't know, as a reader, a lot of times my reaction is like, at first I'm like, oh, whoa, like I'm not used to this. I'm used to third person limited and all that kind of stuff. And then after like a chapter, 2 chapters, whatever, I've kind of moved past that. Now I'm just enjoying the story. And then you get to see these benefits to the different writing style that you don't see otherwise, and almost is, like Charles said, a breath of fresh air. And I think that a first person present tense, it's really cool because it feels like you're right there in the middle of those action sequences. And I liked it a lot. I thought it was really cool.
Yeah, you kind of have to retrain your brain a little bit too sometimes when you're so used to reading like Game of Thrones or like First Law, which have those like we jump around from different perspectives and we get their like omniscient thoughts and stuff. But then it's like, okay, now I'm reading like a totally different paced perspective. So that alone was super interesting. And I just appreciated how you made it fit with the like magic system of the story too. Just like very fluid, very immediate, very like, let's go.
Yeah. Yeah. And my other books are not like that. And I wanted to do something different in writing this one. So
yeah, I mean, we had Mark Lawrence, who I'm sure you've had interactions with through his spiff
I
bow in
mean,
one way
you'd
or
think,
another.
yeah, kind of a
So
little bit.
he, we wrote him some questions and he answered some. And he said the only time that something is ever happening in a book now is if the book is written in present tense. He's kind of saying how he jumps through timelines, and sometimes people get on him for being like, but the past stuff isn't happening now. It's like, it's all written in past tense, so none of it is happening now unless it's present tense. So I just thought it's cool to be like, oh wow, this is happening right now, anything can happen.
Yeah, I like that, because like, I don't know, it's all like you said, after you read a chapter or two, it just blends together. But there's something about past tense that feels like, even if you don't get the frame story, like in Kingkiller Chronicles, that it's there, that somebody survived to tell you the story. Like, you're pretty sure the narrator isn't going to die. Like whoever this person is, who like maybe hasn't named themselves, or like in that case has as narrator. Like, yeah, it doesn't feel as immediate, and it feels a little bit maybe safer somehow, to me at least. Yeah.
I think so too. So you mentioned Kingkiller Chronicle. Is Tidecaller Chronicles, is that supposed to sound like Kingkiller Chronicle, or is that coincidence?
No, I hadn't actually thought of that, like sonic resonance. I had a much worse title for the series, and unfortunately I have author friends who like pulled me back from the brink with their genius. And one night over a chat, I was just like, guys, I have these names and they're not very good, and here's some nouns that could be cool. Can you help me?
Right. It was the Deluge something, right? Deluge.
Yeah, I think it was like the Deluge Saga, or like the Drowned Cycle. I don't know. Like, I don't really like naming books and series, because like it's very hard to make them not sound generic. It's just like when you summarize the plot of a fantasy or science fiction book in like less than 5 minutes, it's going to sound so generic. It's awful. Like, it's just a product of our genre, that like, to signal genre and to have the tropes that we expect in it, you can't really say it short without it just sounding like every other book. So I really like Tidecaller Chronicles, and I think that it has a ring to it. I had not thought about Kingkiller, and it's Kingkiller Chronicles, right?
Yeah, I think it's not plural, and I think you said Tidecaller Chronicles is plural, right?
Okay, there we go.
So
that's how I'm not ripping out Pat Rothfuss.
Yeah. So, but yeah, no, it's got that ring to it. If there's anyone that you want to be kind of echoing the ring to the way that the things they write sound, then it's probably Patrick Rothfuss, right?
Oh man, but no shade on Patrick Rothfuss, but like if he was going to write a 9-book series,
well, we won't dive too deep into those waters.
We're going to need some kind of advanced gene therapy to live long enough. Anyways.
So anyway, we're also wondering some of this around the process of coming up with something as big as the Tidecaller Chronicles are going to be. So 9 books is what we're hearing right now, this trilogy of trilogies. And
plus a few novellas, probably.
Okay.
Of course, got sprinkle a few novellas in there.
Maybe different perspectives. I mean, I want to get into more of those. Are some of my spoiler questions, maybe in the future. But I'll say, while we're still here, I want to ask you about the process of outlining versus discovery writing. It seems like you're more of a outliner in the vein of a Brandon Sanderson's style, rather than a discovery writer like friend of the show Mark Lawrence. So so the process of a Levi Jacobs or an L.W. Jacobs novel, what's it look like when you're preparing to go about writing something? What's an outline look like, and then how much does it change from there?
So the outline starts with just like the cool ideas. Like, this one was like this character Alethea, and I had already done these background sketches, and I'd kind of created the world, but then I like changed it to make her story better and to fit it better. But basically I start off with just like, I think these things would be cool, and then the question is kind of, how do they happen? And my document, and this is entirely ripped off from Brandon Sanderson, because I started listening to his writing podcast when I was very impressionable. So my outline has a column for plot, a column for character, and a column for setting /world/magic. And so I just start developing all of those in tandem. And when the plot calls up a question about who is this person going to be, I go over to character. And then at some point those columns get to be so long on my computer screen that I start to section them off into like beginning, middle, end. And then they start to section off into, I don't think about chapters, but I think about like sections or scenes. So they start to get split into that. And then there's just a lot of polishing and revising when I'm like, okay, I think this is weak. So how can I seed that in? And then I put notes for what I need to seed in each chapter. Because I'm a believer that for a book to feel satisfying, every chapter should have something that's relevant to plot, to character, and to setting, especially plot and character. But I think in fantasy, setting is just as important. So I try to make something interesting happen in all of those. And I also try to keep my chapters under 3,000 words so that you don't feel like as a reader, sometimes I feel stuck in a chapter when I'm like reading before bed and I like the chapter, but I'm like, I need to go to sleep. And so I start paging ahead to see where it ends. And if I have to page more than like 10 times on my phone, which is where I do a lot of my reading, I'm like, oh God, like, can't you just wrap it up? So I try to make a lot of natural breaks, even if the break once makes you want to keep reading. Like I think that and that's something I learned from the Expanse series is they have epic books told in very bite-sized chapters, and I think that's a great way to make the book pull you through. So I try to split them up into that, and so in the end of it I have a document that's got like 5 columns because there's like number and then there's estimated word count, and then I note in there, is it a scene, is it a sequel, is it development, and then I've got my plot, character, setting. And then I have other weird charts about like what the character names are and notes about the backgrounds. And those documents are like anywhere from like 5,000 to 15,000 words probably. And then I have a separate Wikipedia. Well, it's just for me, but I call it my wiki that is like all the background stuff of the world. And the one for Tidecaller Chronicles is swelling for sure, but the one for the Empire of Resonance is legit as long as a book. Like it's huge. Wow. So I keep those separate because those ones I'm going to use for all the books. I need to reference them. So I think that's what it looks like, if that makes any sense. I wish that I could like screen share with y'all, but it's audio, so take my word for it. They're complex. I plan a lot, and then I leave room for the pantsing to happen in the writing of it when I'm like, this is cool, this is better, let me just adjust the outline. The outline gives me a place to start, and then like my intuition like keeps me going, I guess.
That's awesome.
Nice. Yeah, sounds like you give yourself a lot of outline to guide your process, but you also allow yourself the flexibility to do what you want and do what's most cool and entertaining.
Yeah, I think the characters in particular will really fall flat if you don't give them room to breathe. Unless, like, if you've been writing all of those characters for a long time, maybe you know them well enough to plan it ahead of time. But like, if it's a first book, I don't actually really know who they are. So I think they'll do this, and then when I get to that point, I'm gonna be like, nope, that is not right. So like, the story's got to change because the character like has to stay true to who they are.
That makes a lot of sense. I know even Brandon Sanderson is famous for his outlining and being so focused on applying everything out, all this kind of stuff. And even he says he discovery writes his characters, right? So I would think that, you could do a lot worse than modeling your writing style after someone like Brandon Sanderson, for sure.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah.
So here's something I've been wondering. Much like Brandon Sanderson, you've written both adult and young adult, right?
Yeah.
So your past stuff is more adult. And I was thinking, so Dark Flood and Fury is young adult, and you self-published it. So that's entirely your call, right? As to whether this is young adult or adult. When did you figure that out, that it was young adult? Is it something you knew at the start, or something that became young adult when you were writing it?
Yeah. Like the like, I don't know if we call YA genre or what, or reading level. It's so nebulous, and I've had this debate with my friends about like what makes it YA. And the interesting thing is that when I'm just publishing on Amazon, which is what I'm doing right now, they don't really have a marker for YA. They have like juvenile fiction, and then they have adult fiction. And those juvenile to me says something different than YA. And so I didn't really have to define it. But when I was writing it, I was absolutely thinking YA. And to me, what YA means is mostly about the prose. Like, how fast does it move? How complex is it? And how emo is it? And this book is much more emo than my other books, because in theory, writing for a younger audience that's like experiencing life in a much more passionate way, and that maybe their reading level isn't as high as like your Game of Thrones reader. But the ironic thing is that people of all ages adore YA, and I think that
Yeah.
a lot of times staying focused on like the plot moving, on the characters being clear and concise and being grounded in their experience of it, and like letting that be dramatic, I think it just makes for good books a lot of times. So this book is strange. It had a lot of history before I put it out myself. I had an offer for a 3-book deal from a traditional press years ago,
Mm.
and they bought it as epic fantasy. And you just said, you'll have to make it a little longer for it to be epic fantasy, but that's what it is. And I was like, oh, I thought it was YA, but okay. And then I had an agent represented after that, and he thought that it was YA. And so I feel like it kind of straddles the line. But in my mind,
Yeah.
I was absolutely writing it to be YA, but I wanted it to be epic YA. I wanted the scope to be there, even though the prose and the plot, and to some extent, the character felt really focused in the way that YA fantasy does. So I'm trying to walk that line, and that's part of why this is going to be a trilogy of trilogies, is that I want each book to be really digestible and fast, but I want the story to get huge in the way that I love as an epic fantasy reader. So I just need a lot of books to do that. A lot of like short, intense books. That's the goal.
An epic trilogy of short, fast-paced books. I kind of like that. I've always appreciated like faster pacing myself, especially when you're writing. Your writing style, your magic system involves a lot of kind of fast pace. You got intrigue and action, so um, it's both. You get the best of both worlds. You get the epic series, lots of books, but then you also get to move the pace pretty fast, tell that contained story, have that reading experience captured in that like YA way too. Very smart.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you bring up the emo level is a
Yeah.
huge
I like that.
aspect.
Yeah.
I never thought about I thought what you're gonna start what I usually hear is like age of protagonist, but then
Right.
that doesn't
Yeah.
really
Yeah, I
equate
don't
at
think it
all, because
tracks.
it's like,
Yeah.
like Althea's I think like pretty similar age like Vin at the start of Mistborn, I would guess, or like Nona in Mark Lawrence's Red Sister is
Yeah.
even
And she starts
younger,
out like
and that's
6 years
adult.
old. That
And
is a
it's
grim
like,
dark adult.
yeah, and I mean, even like Jorgs, while we're talking about Prince of Thorns, that he's probably
Yeah.
age-wise around the same age as
Shouldn't
some of
be
these
doing
other
what he's doing.
characters, but definitely not young adult. So it's like
Yeah.
the emo levels and almost how focused this is on the internal experience of the protagonist. And I don't know, I find that really interesting. And because internal
Yeah.
emotional experience is making me want to get into more questions that are probably a little bit more spoilery. It has me thinking maybe let's ask
Is it time to
Levi
transition?
here. Yeah, let's ask Levi here where folks can find him on the internet, and
Okay, totally.
then we'll get into
So
the spoilery portion.
yeah, so if you don't want to find out all Alethea's dark secrets, stop listening now. And you can find my books on Amazon by searching Levi Jacobs. I think it still brings up the Empire of Resonance saga, which is coming out later this spring. The first one comes out in March, but it'll definitely bring up the Tidecaller Chronicles. The second book of which I'm hoping to have out in late March. And my website, levijacobs.com, has a lot of stuff, especially just go to levijacobs.com/free. And there are free novellas there. There'll be one set in this universe pretty soon, but there's some set in the, well, spoilers, they're in the same universe. He likes Sanderson. But in the same world. So there's some in the Empire of Resonance world. And there's audiobooks there too that are free. So if you just want to check me out and you don't want to drop some cash to do it, that's a good place. And then you can find out a lot more about me. I do some stuff on social media, but it's sporadic because I honestly don't love spending my time there. And I'm a father of 2 and my wife's in grad school, so there's not a lot of time to spend. But my Twitter handle is at IRL Levi Jacobs, like in real life, Levi Jacobs. It's hard to say out loud, but it makes sense when you see it. And Facebook is facebook.com/author Levi Jacobs. And that's the one that truly is a lot of crickets. But I might make moves. I just really don't like Facebook.
Our Facebook page too. It is, I don't know
Yeah.
how. I basically only keep that going to keep Charles satisfied because but Twitter and Insta way better. But find Levi on all those platforms he just listed and read Daughter of Flood and Fury if you haven't, because it's awesome. Go buy that thing. And anyway,
Thank you.
if you have already read Daughter of Flood and Fury, then you're ready
Let's get into the dirt.
Yeah,
That's right.
you're ready to hang around a little bit longer here. So something that struck me that you here be spoilers from here on out. I'll say it
Yes.
officially.
Yep, we're wading
do
out
this.
into the deep pool of spoilers.
We're melding our minds in the waters.
Yes, exactly.
Getting
There
immersed
shall
in
be
it.
no secrets
Our
unless I have a
immersion
partial
into the
blind.
world
Yes.
of Levi Jacobs here. So something that stuck out to me that you were just talking about is this bit about there was another character that was a main character and this whole other book thing going on. Is that still, are those characters still in Daughter of Flood and Fury at all? Or are those like, is it just completely different now that you
I think that character wise, Alethea is the only one that made it.
Okay.
But setting wise, so like it's probably clear that this is a post-apocalyptic setting. I mean that these like terrible floods come and destroy civilization every few hundred years, or almost destroy it. And there are deep reasons behind that, which I shall not spoil here. But so there's this group of islands called the Sorrente Islands off the peninsula where this book is set. And they're very strange pillars that rise up from the ocean, and they are skyscrapers that were flooded long ago, but still exist. And I'm having fun in the book that I'm writing right now. A lot of it happens in relics of water towers that are like insane. The people of this age cannot imagine making them, but they inhabit them. So anyway, that was the main setting for all the King's Bastards, was those islands that were essentially like rotted skyscrapers that like now have land on them and stuff because it's taken long enough. But there's still a mysterious like structure of, I think they must have been built out of aluminum to not rust. So that setting is still there. And this is so weird to do spoilers, but as you know, in the end, Deshaun runs away and he's like, we're going to refound the temple in the kind of this rebellion move. And I think that they're going to end up on those islands, and all the King's Bastard was about a rebellion that was brewing on those islands. So there's some follow through.
Interesting. So you mentioned Deshaun here, who's not Deshaun, rough showing, honestly, for Deshaun. all
Poor guy.
like kind of like, it was interesting because I felt like Deshaun almost from the start seemed like you were slotting him in to be kind of the typical young adult like love interest who's they've been friends for a long time and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, okay, so maybe here we go again with this. But then that goes a totally different direction where Deshaun in the end, I guess maybe hard to say, but does some pretty messed up things and like really betrays Alethea and Gaxna there. So
hardcore.
Not pumped about Deshaun's actions there, but you mentioned Deshaun going out to these like Islander pillars or what have you.
Yeah.
And if we're following that, can we expect the Tidecaller Chronicles to like start going multiple POV or anything like that? Or is it going to stay focused on just Alethea?
Yeah, I am not totally sure about that. I think it's going to be central to Alethea always, but one of the goals in writing a trilogy of trilogies is that I want the beginning of each trilogy to be a fresh starting point, so that you won't have to have read books 1 through 3 if you want to start at 4. I want to take the reader from 0 in book 4 and again in book 7. So I think when I do that, it might make the most sense to jump into someone else's head, and then we'll have the thing that I feared long ago, which is multiple first-person POVs. Or I might do the thing that some people do, where Alethea is the only one who gets to use I, and the other characters will be written in third. I don't know about that yet, but I think that probably the story is going to get so epic that we can't really just tell it through Alethea's eyes. Although I've realized that some of the deeper implications of the magic of the Therakant magic. So this is just a little hint, and I like doing things like this, but there's a couple of times, especially in the scene where Alethea is talking to Yellen and like apologizing for what happened. And Yellen's fingers start tapping, and Yellen's like, I have to go. This is a way that the Therakins can talk to each other when they have each other's blood, because they don't sense thoughts, so they can't understand what people are thinking, and they can't like talk telepathically the way that monks could if they had a water connection. And they do that through rivers and streams. But the Therakins can basically use Morse code to talk to each other. And we're building a little bit of a network of Alethea now having Yellen's blood and a few other people having each other's blood, so that they can talk to each other even from a very far distance by using this once they learn it. So I think that that might be my fantasy cell phone in terms of getting us updates from afar, and getting some of that information across without having to have a lot of points of view. Because to do a point of view justice in a book, you just have to have the book be longer. Like, you can't. It's unless you're going to kind of have a throwaway point of view. For me, I've just found that if I have more than a chapter or two in a point of view, they need to have like half the chapters or something for us to care about them and to have a reason to be with them. And I want to, like I said, I want to keep these books like tidy and very page turny. So I don't know what's going to happen with that. Is the TLDR answer.
Sounds like you have a couple options though, so it should be exciting to see where it ends up. The idea that like you can stay tight to Alethea, but through the magic system you can keep tabs on kind of faraway areas and different kinds of people. It's like you can tell if a person's in trouble or not, or if they're calling for help or not, things like that. It opens up some possibilities.
Yeah, and there's possibilities for hijacking too, because if someone has your blood, they can make you do things. So you can think that someone is sending this message to you and it's actually someone else. And that's, I think, pretty much planning for that to be a thing in book 3. So
nice. Yeah. So how far along are you right now in the writing process? And you said that you have plans to have the second book come out when did you say? It was sooner.
I'm afraid of what I said, because I've been telling people late March.
Okay, yeah.
And that feels a little bit crazy, especially because we've maybe decided to go on vacation in the second half of March, which is very bad timing for launching a book. Right. So I might push that back to do justice to the fact that I'm a father and have a family. But that's the goal. I would really like to get the third book out before I start selling fruit in the summertime, because that's an all-consuming job and I basically stop writing. And I would like to have the trilogy out so that people have a satisfying conclusion, and I can like sort of have a clean break when I come back in the fall and start writing that next series or write a different series. So it's kind of a breakneck pace, but the book has been flowing really well. I'm 30,000 words into it as of like 5 p.m. today. And I think that the book will be 70 or maybe 80. Which is about the length of Daughter. So I'm hoping to have a draft of it done in the middle of next month, which sounds crazy. But now that I work with editors, I also need to tell them and schedule it ahead of time. So I've got a deadline, which is late February. So that's the plan. It's a little bit scary, but I think as a hybrid author, I have to get used to it too, because I think the trad world just slaps deadlines on you and you deal with it.
Well, as I'm sure you can harken back to your graduate student days and get used to those deadlines again. Although I think, I don't know, it sounds like you're cranking these things out. So I'm excited, because something that now that we're in the spoiler portion, I want to ask about is Gaxna. Gaxna was my favorite character in this whole
cool
thing. Oh yeah, I love the roguish type
Yeah.
characters.
Yeah.
It's like it sounds like you read Red Sister, and I love
Yep.
Clara. And
Yeah. Oh, interesting.
Gaxna
Yeah.
kind of gave me some Clara vibes.
Ah,
And
that's cool. I mean, I listened to the episode and you mentioned that, but I had not thought of it before that at all.
yeah, no, it was awesome.
Cool.
I love this. Like the first rule of
Thievery. Yep.
thievery. Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't want to mess it up, but so Gaxna, awesome character, and I was legit gonna we would have had real beef, not just like you go to see you and I go to see SU beef, like real beef if you went all in on killing Gaxna off, because you kind of flirted with that at the end.
I teased it hard, yes.
Were you legitimately considering killing Gaxna off, or did you always know, like, okay, I'm gonna give them a little glimmer of hope here?
The first draft of the book, she died.
Oh, you.
She died, and that
bastards. It was an appropriately titled book.
All the King's Bastards.
All the King's Bastards. Yeah.
And that's the first time that I've made myself cry while writing. It was super emotional. And
that was
an
intense moment.
Yeah, that, and then just like, yeah, okay, God, this is crazy to do spoilers, but I had such a killer last line for it when Gaxna died. So as it is right now, like the line is similar, but I'm just gonna pull it up because I want to read it to you, since we're doing deep
an alternative universe.
Oh yeah. Yep, alternative universe. And this is a thing that I offer to my subscribers who, because in the back of the book there's a note like, if you sign up for my newsletter, you can get this free novella, and you can get the alternate ending to Daughter of Blood and Fury. And so this is the alternate ending that I would send them. Let's see, we're going all the way back to draft 2.
Wow.
And I
Dylan, you might want to turn this down in your headphones, huh?
Yeah, no, I'm pumped. We're getting the deep cut here. Okay, you know what? I'm just gonna read a section here. Here we go. All right, so
from the author himself.
Alethea is she's reflecting on it. She's on the Perler ship. She's reflecting on what happened, and her dad telling her, ready the city or ready the world if you can. And she says, I think it's what Gaxna would have wanted. She tried to act like she didn't care, but she threw me a rope when I was being chased by a pack of Bloodborne that first day, and was always on the watch for runaways to help. I feel like Gaxna now, watching from the rooftops as the world runs from danger. And I think this is basically the same in the book, but it ends different. A danger it doesn't even know is there. Like I have the choice to throw my rope or not, and not throwing would be so much easier. But I can hear my ancestors' voices, hear my father's voice in the spray off the starboard bow, catch Reggiana's snap when I jump from a boarding skiff into the waves. They echo what I already know, that I have to do something. And I will, as soon as I can catch that spray without weeping, because my lover's voice is in it too.
Oh, crap.
So, yeah, I'm proud of that line, and I didn't get to use it, so I got to say it here.
Yeah, no, that's an awesome line. I still probably would have flung my Kindle across the room, I think.
I mean, I'd be happy to get that reaction. It's like, yes, I got him.
That's true.
Yeah, I'd probably have to send you a bill to fix my wall or something like that for the. I mean, because I was legit. There's a while. I mean, it felt like a while where it's like, oh wait, like is he actually gonna follow through with this? But I was waiting for it. So what made you decide to change it?
There is a couple things. One is just that I feel like you shouldn't waste a character, and like that is sort of like a cheap punch at the end of the book. My friend Emma Wong. Oh, okay. I can't talk spoilers about other people's books. Never mind. Sometimes I feel like deaths of characters are so good and drive the book deeper. And this one kind of felt more like a cheap trick to me. And I realized that Gaxna could be really interesting if she stayed around. And the other thing was just watching the 100. Have you guys watched that show?
No.
It's kind of like cheap thrill entertainment for me when my brain is dead after a long day of selling fruit. And they had a beloved character who was lesbian, and the main character has relationships with people of all genders. And they ended up killing off that female love interest, and their fans just went crazy because they're like, you killed her off because she was the woman interest, and your main character, who's female, needed to end up with a guy. And obviously, Alethea is not ending up with Deshaun.
Let's hope not.
But I was afraid of raising ire of following this trope called "kill your gays" trope. It's important to me to not repeat that kind of representation when it's, like when they're seen as another kind of token character. And I don't see Gaxna that way. And I just thought about it, I was like, there's great reasons to keep her around, and I don't really want to have this negative representation. So I decided not to do it.
That's well said. When I think about the relationship between Gaxna and Alethea, like that's one of the big themes of the book is Alethea's like constantly like, life is pretty good now. I could kind of pause and enjoy life with Gaxna. So when you have this idea of like happiness versus discovering the truth, you take away Gaxna, it's like you take away that theme, that conflict also potentially. So I think it's smart where it's like she's always there. Now she's balancing like her quest for the truth, and all it's doing is taking her away from a happy life with Gaxa, so balancing that is a
she has to stay human and like get her own, instead of just being like, I think the series would get really grimdark if Gaxna was out of it, because Alethea would just become driven to like save the world, but like be losing herself in the process, and that would be an interesting story too. But I think I made the right choice, even if I had to throw away that line.
I think so too. And I think not just because I would have been personally very upset by it, but also I think like it's this glimmer of hope, and it's this person who represents why the world is worth saving. And I think that like this is kind of the weird thing about fantasy. I find sometimes it's like the world is always in danger. It feels like the world's always about to get destroyed. So we're kind of like, okay, but that's just the world. Like that thing is always in trouble. But why is this world worth saving to me as the reader? It's because of the people in it and the characters and their relationships. So for me, as someone who, I'm reading this first person present tense book about Alethea, I feel like I'm Alethea going through this right now. And I'm like, no, we can't lose Gaxna. That's all we have. So I'm like, I think for me as a reader, like you would have hit me hard in the feels for sure, even harder than you did. But at the same time, I find like what makes me want to read book 2 is the fact that Gaxna appears, I would guess, is still out there, and there's something to save this world for. There's someone.
That's a really good point and really well spoken.
Yeah, Levi, thank you very much for keeping Gaxna alive, because there's an alternate reality where I just have to keep talking Dylan down all the time. He's just so upset. We have to go to record, and he keeps bringing it up. I'm like, just okay, buddy. It was very sad, but we have to move on. There's more books.
I don't know if I can talk to a guy who did this. Like, I just don't know. I mean, maybe L.W. Jacobs, but not this Levi Jacobs guy who's out there killing my favorite characters in the book and just leaving Alethea with nothing left to fight for. So I think what you've done is give us the opportunity to say like, okay, well, like now we've got something to fight for, and I'm interested to see how Alethea decides to go about it. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, that's good. That is the place I want you to end book 1 feeling.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. So here's another thing that came up for me reading is because you've been pretty open about this idea that a lot of it has to do with these societal structures and how that influences people's expression and understanding of gender, and you kind of explore that through the magic system. So I was like, I kind of this moment I was sitting outside, I was reading my Kindle, and I was like, still trying to figure out exactly what you're doing with it. And then I was like, I think I know what he's doing now. So here's my sense is, and you let me know if this is that our English teacher, Mr. Miller, me and Charles's English teacher, told us to overanalyze books, or if I'm onto something. All right.
Okay.
So I feel like it's this like in Darflin and Fury, society tells us that male magic involves thoughts, right? While female magic involves emotions. But Althea is someone who's capable of both. And really, it's the societal structures, not any sort of innate ability or inability having to do with sex that's hindering people's ability to use potentially both masculine and feminine magic. Like that's kind of an arbitrary thing that the world put on them. But and I think you've been open about that part. The part that I'm wondering is like, is the societal messages telling men that they should express themselves more cognitively, more through thoughts, while women receive the societal message that tells them to express themselves and therefore their magic through more of these like emotional aspects? Is that supposed to mirror the kind of messages that we receive in our real world? And yeah, and if so, what made you interested in exploring that?
Well, yeah, I think that I think the first thing to say about it is that I don't have like a message that I want to like be preaching behind the scenes of the book. I definitely want to explore different concepts that I think are really loaded in society with this series. And the first book is focused on gender. The second one is going to be focused on possession or wealth or materialism, however you want to look at it. But I don't go in wanting to say that like we should all give up all our possessions, or we should all like define ourselves, like we should make up each person should make up their own gender, etc. I don't want to go in with that. I find these concepts interesting, and I sort of want the characters to teach me about them by going through a life in which it's much more loaded for them than it is for me, and see how they deal with it and what they come up with. But yes, in the design of the world, in thinking about gender, like in fantasy world, like it easily could have been the opposite, that men were the ones who were passionate and emotional, and women's were like, did I just say women's? I did. And female identifying people were very cognitive. And I think I chose to hew closer to like the norms that we find, at least in US society, because I didn't want that very radical otherness of the world design to throw people off and continually be like, wait, but these guys are so weird. I wanted it to be familiar so that we could explore it. So I think some of that design is there, that like the people in Surrey happen to think similar things to gender roles that we do in the US. Just because I didn't want that to be an opaque part of the world building. I wanted us to get through that and to think about like what really is the use or the purpose and the effects of defining gender so narrowly. Yeah.
Now, that's so well said, Levi. And it's for a second, I thought you were going to tell me that Mr. Miller just has me over analyzing this, but it does sound like you were kind of trying to learn through this. Rather, you weren't trying to teach, you were trying to learn, I guess, by exploring these ideas and mirroring some of the societal messages that folks receive out here.
Totally. Yeah. I think Mr. Miller did you well in getting you to think about these things, and what you said earlier about needing a reason to care about the world being at stake. Like that's some great literary analysis. So I feel like you got to give Mr. Miller a kudos.
Wow.
Wow. You hear that, Mr. Miller? Levi Jacobs thinks you did a good job.
It's kind of strange to hear Mr. Miller's name spoken outside of our circle now.
Mr. Miller's a thing now. Yeah. I mean, he might show up in one of my books. Actually, oh boy, I've got a character in the book I'm writing right now. Well,
oh God.
Mr. Miller probably doesn't want to be secretly evil, so.
He can. I don't think.
But Mr. you know what?
He's down for whatever.
Yeah. I do kind of have a beef against the over-analysis of literature. I was a literature major. That was my bachelor's degree, literature and philosophy. And there was like a huge divide between them in a way that you wouldn't think. And I often got annoyed by not looking for meaning in literature. Like, I think that's fine, but in trying to say something different for the sake of saying something different and coming up with these like wacky interpretations that like you got to really stretch the prose to get them. Like, like authors aren't divine beings. Like we can like hopefully tell a story that's entertaining, and then hopefully beyond that, one that's sort of meaningful to you. But like if we're not talking about Shakespeare, like don't talk to me about like the significance of the quality of the air in Faulkner. It's like, no, this is like, don't spend your life writing that dissertation. Like you can read it and you're pretty much going to get what Faulkner meant like the first time, or read somebody else's opinion and like move on. That's how I feel. And so it's funny that I ended up being a writer, but I'm not one just trying to like seed James Joycean level meaning into my stuff. I want it to be accessible.
Right. Sometimes the shirt a character is wearing is just green because it's green. It's not.
It's not
it
about
doesn't always
Islam.
symbolize anything.
Right.
Oh, that's well said, Levi. So it's kind of more telling an entertaining story first, and then second is what kind of ideas can I grapple with and learn from.
Absolutely. And I think the philosophy major in me can't possibly think about something as long as I think about my books without getting into like the ideas and concepts behind it. I'm like diving deep into the concept of institutionalization and like consent to joining hegemonic systems. Here I go with these words in book 2. And they're never going to say that, but it's got me thinking about it quite a bit. And my the character who would be Mr. Miller if Mr. Miller wanted to be evil was talking about different kinds of prisons and being stuck in a prison of morality just yesterday. So it's just the person that I am that I end up writing about this stuff, but I don't go in wanting to convince you of anything.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm thinking that the idea of having more of an entertainment first perspective is probably the one that's going to appeal to the most readers and will allow you to kind of follow more of that intuition.
And best prepares you for reading Daughter of Flood and Fury also. Like is definitely meant to be exciting, and there's intrigue, not so much like capital L literature, like exposing here. But
and I think the power of literature is that you care about these things because they're happening to someone that you care about. Like if you read an essay about gender roles, you're like, okay, that's what a person thought. But if you read about someone whose whole life has been hard because they've been seen as a heresy because of how they were born, then it's like, I care about this. And like maybe you learn something from their experience rather than from their thoughts. Like they don't even have to say it, or no one has to say it, and just see it in the story.
Yeah.
Sorry, Charles, I feel like I cut you off to like expostulate on my own.
Oh, no, you're good. It's great. Yeah, I mean, man, what else is there to say, guys? I mean, I could keep talking all day, Levi, but I don't want to take up too much of your time now. I know we're at the hour mark.
It's true, we're at the hour mark. We've got to leave some things unspoiled for the people who listen to this even though they haven't read the book yet. We know you're out there,
cheeky listeners. You
this does not replace reading the book. You have to find out why they care about Gaxna so much. Is she really a roguish character?
You have to really, like, the whole idea is that balance, and that to me was the most gripping part of this. I want to pull just a quick quote here. What is life for? All this questing for truth and justice if it means turning down happiness. And that to me, I was like, that is such a great way to tie in like the intrigue with the relationship with Gaxna together. And even Deshawn comes in and is like, what is worth more than us being together? It's it's like they're all trying to find these reasons to find happiness while also dealing with all this political intrigue, and that to me was like the driving force of this book. So I mean, you got to read it just for that, guys, to see these relationships play out. I mean, that we can't do justice.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad that struck you. Yeah.
So don't deny yourself that happiness, listeners who've listened to this entire episode, despite not having read Daughter of Flood and Fury. And Levi, you want to remind them one more time how they can find Daughter of Flood and Fury?
Right. Search for the title, search for my name on Amazon. It's currently exclusive to Amazon. So if you are a Kindle Unlimited member, you can read it for free. And that makes authors like me happy, actually, because I get to see the literal amount of pages that get read of my book every day versus if someone buys it, I see that they bought it, but I don't know if they read it. But when they turn the page, I assume they're not doing it for fun. So in the Kindle Unlimited program, when you read it, I'm like, oh, wow, like they read 900 pages of my book today. That's so cool. I don't know how many people did that, if it was 900 like single first pages or if it was like 3 full books, but that's cool. So you can find it there. And then, like I said, I have some free stuff that's on my website, levijacobs.com/free. There's audio there as well as ebooks that you can just get and check out if you want to see what my writing's like. And I have a podcast, since it seems, dear listener, that you like listening to podcasts, which is just talking about spoilers and previews and kind of like the stuff that we've been talking about here, called the Beggars and Brawlers podcast. And you can find links to that on my website as well.
Awesome. And we'll throw those, and by we, I mean Charles, we'll definitely throw all of that into the episode description.
Absolutely.
And
Awesome.
You'll all be able to find all of the Levi Jacobs awesomeness that is out there. You'll look forward to L.W. Jacobs awesomeness that's coming your way soon. And Levi, this has been awesome having you on. We want to have you on some more. We've talked a little. Maybe I can give a little tease that
we don't want
to. I don't. Well, you can always edit this out, Charles. It's just work for you.
I just don't want to put Levi on the spot. You know, he was just being nice.
Oh no, I'm up for it. I'm game.
He seems into it.
You know what? Let's just commit right now. Let's do this.
Okay.
Thing.
Let's hold him accountable. Okay.
You, dear listener, have heard Levi Jacobs commit to joining us for a Friends Creating Fantasy episode. At some point in the future, we're going to have a real live author showing us how it's done, while Charles and I try to figure out how to come up with a story outline with the master outliner himself.
Yes.
Levi in the house. Who knows what the title of that will be?
And then they're probably going to pressure me to write it afterwards if our conversation beforehand is any
100%.
indication.
Yeah.
That's always been our dream. I mean, we've already told Levi that if he wants to write the Darkness of Power, which was our last one, then it's all his. And you can do the Ravens fantasy too, unless
Levi, we want you to write it. We want you to sell the movie deals, video games. Like, we want the whole universe built.
I'll have my people talk to your people. Like, let's do this.
Yeah, exactly.
We gotta find some people.
We'll work on finding people, and
I'll find some people too. Actually, I'll just be honest. I had some people and I fired them, and I went indie. So I guess I've got some people now, but I don't know if they're the people. We'll figure it out.
All right. Well, people will talk to people once we found all the people. But for now, we're just talking here with you, Levi. It's been so awesome. And I think that, I think we can look forward to the next time that you're on. So
I'd love to come back.
Yes. Always welcome, Levi. Awesome. Thank you so much for coming. It was a pleasure having you. Daughter of Flood and Fury, guys. Check it out on Amazon and Kindle Unlimited. And I think we're ready for some sweet outro music.
Let's hit it.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for listening to yet another very exciting episode of the Friends Talking Fantasy podcast. If you like what you heard today, reach out to us on Twitter at the FTF Podcast with a number 1 at the end. We're also on Facebook and Instagram if you like those, and that's at the FTF Podcast. Shoot us an email at theftfpodcast@gmail.com. Now, if they wanted to show some support, Dylan, and they just happen to be listening on Apple Podcasts, what kind of options do they have?
I've got an idea. What if they, like me, dear listeners, went on and saw that there was a place to leave some stars, or maybe even write a touching and compelling quote about how much they enjoyed this, that they listened to the end even though they hadn't read the book.
This guy gets it.
About the quality of these hosts and the podcast that they are publishing on a tri-weekly basis, people. This is not easy to do.
Tri-weekly.
You understand.
This is why we need authors on the show.
And sheer vigor that goes into this podcast. It deserves 5 stars. That's all I have to say about the matter. My name is Levi Jacobs and L.W. Jacobs, and I endorse this podcast.
Wow, both of them.
Dylan, I think we just got to leave it there. There's nothing left to be said. Levi, thank you. It was a pleasure. Thank all of you for listening. Daughter of Flood and Fury, Amazon, Kindle Limited. Check it out. And as always, guys, go forth and conquer, friends.